Hi, I'm Amanda Jane Woodall and welcome to my fashion school. So today I'm going to be talking about a British singing sensation whose album Back to Black was so much of a media frenzy that it actually disturbed the person who wrote it. So here's the very tragic story of Amy Winehouse. Amy Jade Winehouse was born on the 14th of September 1983 to her parents Mitch and Janice. And Mitch was a singer, but his career, it didn't go very well, so he ended up driving a London taxi. And her mother Janice was a pharmacist until she was struck with a chronic illness. Amy's mum described her as resonating at a different frequency, which I really love, and her family was very musical and singing came as naturally to Amy as breathing. She had a typical North London Jewish family with lots of love and family gatherings until after a 9-year affair her dad Mitch actually left the family home. And of course, the whole family struggled with this, but Amy saw some positives in her newfound freedom. Now she didn't have a strict parent around, she could wear short skirts, she could play truant and have her boyfriend around. And her mum admits that Amy was a force of nature and she couldn't always discipline her. Her paternal grandmother, Cynthia Levy, had a profound effect on Amy, and she directed Amy to use her talents, and she joined the Sylvia Young Theatre School. Amy stood out from her peers with a shockingly mature singing voice. She was passionate about jazz music and idolised Tony Bennett, Frank Sinatra and Sarah Vaughan. And she joined the National Youth Jazz Orchestra. Although she never considered singing a career choice, she wanted to be a roller skating waitress. In 2001, Amy got her big break into the music industry. Her friend, singer Tyler James, introduced her to Nick Shemansky, and he was a talent scout for Brilliant 19 Management. And he offered Amy some studio time so that she could write some music, record some songs, and hopefully get a record deal. At first, Amy was reluctant to share the fact that she actually was a songwriter. Instead, she told Nick she only wrote poetry, and this was because her lyrics were very personal to her and they told her life story. But upon hearing 2 of Amy's songs, the president of Sony was blown away by her disarming honesty because she talked about things like diet culture, depression and family conflicts, and she didn't think anyone in the pop industry was talking about things that affected her. So she wanted to be that relatable role model for other girls in London. And it was a big risk for the record company, Island Records, who gave her a £250,000 advance to make her first album. The first thing that Amy did with her advance was to buy a flat in London, which she shared with her close friends. And she did this because she wanted to smoke naughty stuff and she couldn't do this in her mum's house. And her friends say that at this point they started to notice she was battling with an eating disorder, as well as being confused about her sexuality, as she had a brief affair with her friend who was an openly gay woman. At the age of just 19, Amy wrote her first album, Frank, and she released it in October of 2003. And initial sales were disappointing, but it did receive critical acclaim. One of the songs, co-written by Salam Remy, was about her relationship with an older man, and the song Stronger Than Me won an Ivor Novello Award in 2004. People enjoyed the mix of melodic instrumentals and Amy's shock value lyrics. Amy always had a very strong sense of who she wanted to be, and she already had her own signature style, which mixed different eras and cultures, and that's what London is famous for. And she began to gain some media attention because of her look and her thick London accent and her childlike honesty. Amy was a predecessor of indie sleaze. She wore tacky animal prints mixed with 60s elements like headscarf and the mod brand Fred Perry. And she was always very glamorous but also unkempt, which is a typical British look and made her very relatable. Her hair was very distinctive as she had a towering beehive, and she used fake hair and hairnets to create this hairstyle, and it became more towering and more unstable as her career evolved. And she also wore a winged black eyeliner, which now is a very popular thing to do, but this was the time of pastels and smoky eyes. Amy also reflected the chav British culture of the time, as she wore a lot of chunky gold jewellery and big hoop earrings, and she also sported a Star of David to support her Jewish heritage. What gave her an edge was her tattoos and a Monroe piercing that was then copied and made popular in British society. And after Frank, Amy suffered with writer's block, so she began to frequent the indie guitar scene for inspiration for a new album. Amy became a regular at the Trash nightclub, watching bands like The Libertines and The Kills, and here she met Blake Fielder Civil, who was a promoter for the club, and he had a history of being a troubled individual. He had some substance abuse issues, although he was charm personified when he was introduced to Amy's family. And so began a very troubled and caustic love affair and a period of unemployment for Amy. She went on a girls' holiday to Mallorca, and while she was not in London, Blake took the opportunity to end the relationship and get back with his ex-girlfriend. And this absolutely devastated Amy, who was madly in love with Blake, and this led her to write her most famous album, Back to Black, in 2006, which had the hits like Rehab and You Know I'm No Good. And I would really like to tell you that the success of this album led to happiness for Amy, but unfortunately she led a soap opera existence and had many fluctuating highs and lows in her life. Along with her fame came back Blake Civil Fielder, and the two were married in Miami in May of 2007. When they returned home, they began to take Class A's and drink very heavily, living an addict's lifestyle until Amy actually overdosed in August of the same year. Amy barely survived, and she couldn't get the help and treatment that she needed because she was just basically a product with her music, and she was in a toxic relationship. Her dad stuck by her side, but he was really poorly equipped to handle her fame, and her mum had become very ill with multiple sclerosis. Her main family support had been Cynthia Levy, who sadly passed away from cancer, and this sent Amy spiralling into heavy drug use. And her friends just distanced themselves because they couldn't help her and didn't want to be around her addictions. Amy began to look very unstable whilst performing, and this led to a media scrutiny and the disappointment of her loyal supporters. And her home was actually raided on the 8th of November 2007, and Blake was arrested for GBH and perverting the course of justice. And this was a very sad moment for Amy, and she just spiraled into turmoil because she couldn't even leave the house anymore without media flashing cameras in front of her face. And she'd really enjoyed her life before, where she could just walk through London and be friends with the locals. But Amy's success actually potentially saved her life at this time, as she was nominated for 6 Grammy Awards. and her record label gave her the ultimatum that she had to get clean or she couldn't go to the Grammys. So she went to the Capio Nightingale Treatment Centre to receive help for her addiction, and she actually managed to get clean from Class A drugs, which is a fantastic achievement. And she appeared at the London Hammersmith on November 2008 to receive 5 Grammy Awards, and one of these she received from her lifelong idol, Tony Bennett. And it's really just so sad because Amy actually did manage to beat her Class A addiction, but she just couldn't get a handle on alcoholism or her bulimia. And doctors at the Priory had warned her that if she carried on drinking, her heart would stop beating. She went on a very ill-advised tour to Belgrade and she was very unhappy, and so she took to drink as a form of escapism. And it was sad because she had made a lot of plans. She wanted to form a jazz supergroup. She wanted to attend her friend's wedding, rekindle her old friendships and support her goddaughter, who also had a music career. And unfortunately, the disease took hold of Amy and she died on the 23rd of July 2011. And after a devastating period of grief and very cruel attacks from the media, her family actually tried to make a positive out of their loss. And they formed the Amy Winehouse Foundation, and this helps young women to get clean from addiction. So we've come to the end of this video. But I'll see you again in my follow-up video when I take you through the style and life story of a British gay icon. Melodic instrumentals and shock value limits, as this limits? Oh no.